Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little different to kick things off today. I want to start with a mental challenge.
Oh, okay. I like this.
I want you, and you too, listening, to close your eyes for a second. Just humor me.
Okay, I'm game. Eyes are closed. I'm ready.
Now, I want you to conjure up the image of a dinosaur discovery. I'm talking about that classic cinematic eureka moment where the sands of time are brushed away. What are you seeing?
Well, if I'm pulling from the pop culture database in my brain, I'm seeing dust, lots of dust.
Yes.
Heat waves shimmering off the ground. I'm seeing a rugged, sun-baked landscape, maybe the Badlands of Montana or the red sandstone canyons of Utah.
Right, that classic American West look.
Totally. And there's almost certainly a guy in a wide-brimmed hat, maybe a bandana around his neck, chipping away at a cliff face with a pickaxe.
That's very rugged.
It's very Western. It's basically Indiana Jones with a rock hammer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is the Hollywood image. It's the romance of the American frontier. It's dry, it's hot, and it's very dramatic. But what if I told you that the real story, the actual moment that American dinosaur science was born, didn't happen in a desert canyon at all?
I have a feeling you're about to dismantle my cowboy fantasy.
I am. Because the story actually starts in a suburban backyard in New Jersey.
New Jersey?
Specifically, a wet, muddy, gray pit in Haddonfield, just a stone's throw from Philadelphia.
It sounds completely improbable to modern ears. I mean, when we think of New Jersey, we think of turnpikes and suburbs, not the land of the lost.
Not at all.
But you are absolutely right. And we are talking about an animal that, honestly, most people couldn't pick out of a lineup today, yet it started everything.
And we aren't talking about the T-Rex. We aren't talking about the Triceratops.
No, we are talking about Hadrosaurus foulkii. And while it might not be the movie star that the T-Rex is, I would argue, and the sources we have today back this up extensively, that Hadrosaurus is the most historically significant dinosaur in North American history.
That is a massive claim. Most significant. You're putting it above the tyrant lizard king.
I stand by it. I really do. This animal represents a massive turning point. Before Hadrosaurus, our understanding of dinosaurs was fundamentally different. It was wrong. This is the creature that forced humanity to rewrite the textbooks.
Wow.
It's the reason we know dinosaurs stood up.
So our mission today is to unpack that claim. We are going to look at a story of firsts. This thing is just loaded with them.
It really is.
It's the first species identified in North America from a skeleton, not just a straight tooth.
Which was the standard before this.
The first dinosaur ever mounted for display in the world.
Anywhere in the world. A huge deal.
And the dinosaur that literally changed the posture of prehistoric life in our minds, from a four-legged crawler to a bipedal giant.
It's a journey that connects the earliest days of American science, we're talking pre-Civil War era, with modern medical technology, cancer research, and really complex evolutionary biology. It all starts in a mud pit.
So let's get our boots muddy. Let's travel back in time, not to the Cretaceous just yet, but to 1838. We are in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Set the scene for us. Who is Joseph Hawkins?
So Joseph Hawkins is a landowner. He's a local guy in Haddonfield. And in 1838, he is not out looking for monsters. He's overseeing a very mundane, very messy agricultural task. He's overseeing a dig in a marl pit on his property.
Okay, we have to pause there immediately. Marl. We see this word a lot in the older texts regarding this discovery. What exactly is marl, and why on earth is he digging it up?
Marl is this dense, heavy soil or mud that is rich in calcium carbonate and clay. It's actually a sediment formed in marine environments' ancient seafloors.
So it's basically old ocean gunk.
That's a great way to put it. In the 19th century, before we had bags of chemical fertilizer at the hardware store, marl was absolute gold for farmers. It was known as green sand.
Green sand?
Yeah. You'd dig it up, haul it out, and spread it on your fields to enrich the soil because of that mineral content. It was a huge industry in New Jersey at the time.
So it's just fertilizer. He's digging for fertilizer.
Basically. But it's messy stuff. It's often wet, sticky, gray-green mud. So Hopkins has a crew digging near a tributary of the Cooper River. It's dirty, wet, back-breaking work. And suddenly, the shovels hit something hard.
And it's not a rock.
No. They pull out these large, unusual bones. Now, you have to contextualize this. This is 1838. The word dinosaur had barely been coined in England by Richard Owen. That happened around 1842, so Hopkins is actually finding this before the word really exists in the public lexicon.
So he would have had no frame of reference.
Zero in America. The concept was virtually non-existent for the general public. There was no Jurassic Park. There were no museums with giant skeletons.
So when Hopkins sees these massive vertebrae, does he scream? Does he call the newspapers? Does he rush to Philadelphia?
No. He treats them as curiosities. He thinks, look at this big bone. He takes them home. He puts them on display in his house in Haddonfield. They became conversation starters.
Like you have neighbors over for tea and you say,
Hey, look at this giant rock bone I found in the mud. And people would say, oh, that's interesting, and then move on.
and that's it. That's where the story ends for 20 years.
That's it. For 20 years, they just sit there.
That is agonizing. You have the key to American paleontology sitting on a mantelpiece in Jersey, gathering dust, while science marches on without it.
It is a classic example of how scientific discovery relies on serendipity. You need the object, yes, but you also need the right person to see the object.
And Hopkins, for all his digging, wasn't that person.
He was a farmer, not a comparative anatomist. He saw a weird big bone. He didn't see a revolution.
But the right person finally shows up in 1858. Enter William Parker Folk.
Right. So jump forward 20 years.
Hmm.
William Parker Folk is a member of the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. He is what we'd call a gentleman scientist. Very connected, independently wealthy, and very, very curious.
He's not just a hobbyist. He's engaged with the scientific community.
Deeply. And he's spending the summer in Haddonfield, and he hears about these bones.
He hears the local rumors of the giant bones at the Hopkins place.
Exactly. And unlike Hopkins, Folk has the background to understand what he might be looking at. He's been reading the European papers. He's heard of iguanodon.
The light bulb goes on.
Instantly, he visits Hopkins, sees the bones, and his mind just starts racing. He realizes immediately, these aren't whale bones, these aren't elephant bones, these are something else entirely.
His curiosity must have been electric.
It was. He convinced Hopkins to let him go back to that original marl pit. Now remember, it had been 2 decades. A pit dug in mud 20 years ago doesn't stay open.
No, it would be gone.
It was likely overgrown, filled in with silt, maybe even underwater part of the year. It wasn't exactly a marked grave, but Folk was determined.
He wants to find the rest of it.
He does. He goes back to the site, which, by the way, is now a National Historic Landmark, the Hadrosaurus foulkii site, and he hired a crew. He started digging. And this wasn't just a casual afternoon with a trowel. This turned into a full-blown excavation.
I think we need to emphasize the what if here. If Folk hadn't visited that summer.
Oh, absolutely. If Folk hadn't been summering in Haddonfield, or if Hopkins had decided to throw the clutter away 5 years earlier during a spring cleaning, American paleontology might have been delayed by decades.
We might have missed the window for the great dinosaur rush that followed later in the century, because the spark wouldn't have been there.
It's entirely possible. The whole trajectory could have been different.
So Folk is digging. He's finding more pieces, and he realizes he's in over his head. He needs the heavy hitter.
He needs the professional. He contacts Joseph Leidy.
The legend.
Joseph Leidy is a titan of 19th century science. We often hear about Marsh and Cope, the guys who had the famous bone wars later on. But Leidy was the father of them all. He was a mentor to them before they became bitter rivals.
So he was the authority.
He was a paleontologist, a biologist, a parasitologist, a comparative anatomist. He was the guy you called when you had a biological mystery. Folk sends word. You need to see this.
Let's talk about what they actually pulled out of that mud. Because usually when we hear dinosaur discovery in the mid-1800s, it's remarkably underwhelming. It's like we found one tooth and we built a whole dragon out of it.
Correct. Up until this point, North American dinosaur finds were extremely fragmentary. Joseph Leidy himself had named Trachodon and Deinodon based on teeth found out west. Enough to say something big lived here, but not enough to say what it looked like, how it moved, or how big it really was.
But the Haddonfield dig was different.
It was a treasure trove. They didn't find a whole beast. Let's be clear, it wasn't a perfect articulated skeleton like you see in Jurassic Park, where they just brush off the dust and there it is. But they found a significant portion of the skeleton.
Give us the inventory. What was in the haul?
Okay, let's go through the list, because the specific bones matter. They recovered 8 teeth, specifically from the maxilla, which is the upper jaw, and the dentary, the lower jaw.
So just enough to know it was a plant eater.
And how those teeth worked. They found fragments of the jaw itself. They found 3 partial dorsal vertebrae, those are the backbones, and they found 13 caudal centra, which are the tailbones.
And one of those tailbones was pretty special, right?
Yes, they found an almost complete middle caudal vertebra. That's crucial because it gives you the shape of the tail, how thick it was, how much muscle was attached to it. But the real game changer, the thing that made Leidy's eyes pop, was the limbs.
The arms and legs. That's the part that tells you how it moved.
Exactly. They found a partial right coracoid, a left humerus, radius, and ulna. That's the entire arm assembly. They found parts of the pelvis, the ilium, ischium, and pubis. And crucially, they found the left hind limb, the femur, tibia, fibula, and even foot bones.
Okay, so compared to just a tooth, this is like finding the Rosetta Stone.
It really is. It's hard to overstate this. Before this discovery, scientists had to guess the entire shape of the animal based on a tooth or a single bone. Suddenly, Leidy has the arms, the legs, the hips, and the tail.
Yeah.
He can actually do math.
You could do ratios.
He can compare the length of the arm to the length of the leg. He can measure muscle attachments. He's not just guessing anymore. He's doing biomechanics.
And that math leads to a revelation. But first, they have to name it. It's 1858. Leidy sits down to formally describe this thing. What does he call it?
He names it Hadrosaurus foulkii.
Let's break that down for the non-Latin speakers.
The genus name, Hadrosaurus, comes from the Greek. Hadros means bulky or large, and sauros means lizard. So, bulky lizard.
Which, fair, it was big.
It was huge. And the species name, foulkii, is obviously honoring William Parker Folk, the man who recognized the importance of the bones and financed the dig.
But I read in the notes that Leidy was being a little cheeky with this name.
He was. He had a good sense of humor. It's a bit of a pun. If you translate Hadrosaurus foulkii directly, it can be read as Folk's big lizard.
I love that. Hey, Bill, thanks for digging this up. Here's a big lizard named after you. It's so perfectly 19th century gentleman science.
It is. A nice little inside joke in the formal records.
So Leidy is looking at these bones, and he sees a connection to something found across the Atlantic.
Yes. He recognized the bones were dinosaurian because they resembled the iguanodon. The iguanodon had been discovered in England decades earlier by Gideon Mantell. So Leidy knows he's dealing with a dinosaur, a member of this new, strange group of reptiles.
He's not working in a complete vacuum.
Not a complete one, no. But as he starts assembling the mental image of this animal, he realizes something is wrong with the prevailing wisdom. Something is deeply wrong with how they're picturing these things.
The old view.
Right. At this time, the scientific consensus, influenced heavily by Richard Owen in England, who coined the word dinosaur, was that dinosaurs were essentially rhinoceros-like reptiles.
Heavy, lumbering.
Enormous quadrupedal, plodding beasts walking on all four legs. Think of a lizard scaled up to the size of an elephant.
The Crystal Palace dinosaurs in London are the famous example of this, right? They're still there.
They are. And if you go to Crystal Palace Park today, you can see them. They are these big, scaly iguanas on four sturdy, pillar-like legs. That was the absolute truth of science in 1850.
But Leidy looks at the Hadrosaurus bones, and he starts shaking his head.
The measurements just didn't add up for a four-legged walker. He observes a massive disparity between the forelimbs and the hind limbs.
How big of a difference are we talking? Are we talking a little bit?
No, it's significant. The femur, the thigh bone, was over 1 meter long. It was massive and robust. The tibia was also huge, over 93 centimeters. But the forelimbs, the humerus, radius, ulna, were much smaller, much more slender, and less heavily built.
So if this thing was walking on all fours,
it would be constantly walking downhill, or it would have this very awkward hunched posture where the head is way lower than the hips. It just didn't make biomechanical sense. It would look like a frog that was stuck mid-hop.
it's not an efficient way to move if you weigh 4 tons.
Not at all. It's a design for failure. So Leidy takes a leap, a massive intellectual leap.
What does he propose?
He suggested that Hadrosaurus did not walk on 4 legs. He reconstructed it as a biped. He compared it to a kangaroo.
A kangaroo? That must have sounded insane to the Victorian scientific community. You're telling me this 4-ton monster hops around like a kangaroo?
It was a paradigm shift. He proposed that this massive animal, weighing tons, stood up on its hind legs and used its tail for balance, creating a tripod effect. This completely shattered the heavy lizard image.
It changes everything.
It suggested dinosaurs were dynamic, they were upright, they were distinct from modern reptiles in a way nobody had truly appreciated before.
So Hadrosaurus is the animal that stood up. That's a powerful image. And they didn't just write about it. They decided to show the world.
And that brings us to 1868, the Philadelphia Academy of Natural Sciences. Leidy teams up with Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins.
Now, Hawkins is an interesting character. He's the guy who did those Crystal Palace sculptures in London, the 4-legged ones.
Yes. Which makes it even more fascinating. He was an English sculptor and naturalist. He comes to America, sees Leidy's work, sees the physical evidence of the bones, and basically says, I was wrong, let's do it right this time.
That's scientific integrity right there. to be willing to publicly undo your own famous work.
It really is.
Yeah.
They decide to do something that had never been done before in the history of the world. They are going to mount the skeleton.
It's strange to think that there was a time before dinosaur mounts. We take them for granted now. You walk into a museum, you see a skeleton. But in 1868, this was groundbreaking.
It was pure spectacle and science combined. Before this, you might see a few bones in a glass case. Leidy and Hawkins wanted to show the animal as it was in life. They built a metal framework to hold the bones in that bipedal, kangaroo-like pose.
But they hit a snag. They had a lot of the skeleton, but they were missing something crucial.
The head.
The head. The skeleton lacked a skull. And that feels like a pretty big piece of the puzzle to be missing. How do you display a headless dinosaur?
Well, Hawkins was an artist. He didn't let that stop him. He sculpted a plaster skull based on speculation. He looked at the modern iguana, since iguanodon was the closest known relative, and kind of hybridized it with what they knew of Hadrosaurus.
So the head on the world's first mounted dinosaur was fake.
Reconstructed is the polite scientific term, but yes, it was an artistic interpretation. It wasn't bone. Later, as we found related dinosaurs like Gypasaurus or Brachylophosaurus, artists started using those skulls as models to fill the gap. But that original Hawkins skull was a best guess effort.
I imagine this exhibit was popular.
It was a sensation, an absolute blockbuster. It drew crowds from all over. It visualized the prehistoric world in a way books never could. People were lining up to see the monster of New Jersey.
It changed the public consciousness overnight.
It really did. It cemented the image of the upright dinosaur in the American mind for a century.
But speaking of books, there was a bit of a delay on the academic side. Leidy had written his major monograph, Cretaceous Reptiles of the United States, in 1860. But it didn't come out for 5 years. Why the long wait?
The American Civil War.
Right, of course.
The conflict disrupted everything, including scientific publishing, supply chains, and just the general focus of the nation. So while the bones were found in 58 and Leidy had done the work by 60, the comprehensive scientific volume didn't hit the shelves until 1865 when the war was over.
It really grounds this story in history. You have this earth-shattering discovery happening right as the country is tearing itself apart.
It does. It places the birth of American vertebrate paleontology right alongside the defining moment of American history. It's a reminder that science doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's subject to the same forces as everything else.
So let's get physical. We've established it stood up. But how big was this bulky lizard? Give us the stats.
It earned its name. Hadrosaurus was a large animal. We are looking at a length of about 7 to 8 meters.
So roughly 23 to 26 feet long.
Exactly. That's a school bus, give or take, maybe a shorter bus.
A short bus, yes. But the weight is the impressive part. Estimates put it between 2 to 4 tons. That's 2.2 to 4.4 short tons.
To put that in perspective, that's like a very heavy white rhinoceros or a small Asian elephant.
Exactly. Now, imagine an Asian elephant balancing on its hind legs. That gives you a sense of the forces at play on those bones.
And the bones reflect that. They look like they could handle that kind of stress.
Oh, absolutely. Hadrosaurus is described in the literature as ponderously built. Ponderously built. I like that. It's not a ballerina.
No, not at all. When you look at the fibula, the outer shin bone, it is one of the most robust among all hadrosaurs. It was built to bear massive weight. This wasn't a sprinter, it was a tank.
And what about lunch? What is this tank eating?
It's a herbivore. It had a keratinous beak at the front of its mouth, perfect for cropping foliage, stripping leaves off branches, maybe breaking small twigs.
So like a giant turtle beak, kind of.
A good analogy. But the real engineering marvel is the teeth further back in the jaw.
The dental battery.
Yes. This is a hallmark of hadrosaurs. They developed a specialized, complex dentition. They had hundreds of teeth packed together in columns to form these large, grinding surfaces.
So it's not just one row of teeth.
No, it's like a conveyor belt. As old teeth on the surface wore down from chewing tough plants, new ones were constantly erupting from underneath to replace them. It was a highly efficient food processing machine, allowing them to chew tough vegetation that other animals couldn't handle.
I want to get a little technical for a minute. We have listeners who really love the details, and the critique of our earlier discussions was that we skimmed over the why.
Let's do it.
In the notes, there's mention of the pectoral crest and the supraacetabular crest. Why are we talking about these bumps in the bones? Why do they matter so much?
This is where the detective work of paleontology happens. Remember, we don't have a skull. Usually the skull is how you tell species apart. It's the easiest way. Oh, this one has a horn here, this one has a crest there.
It's the face. It's distinctive.
Exactly. Without a skull, you have to look at the minute details of the postcranial skeleton, the body. These little bumps and ridges called apomorphes are the unique features that define a species.
Okay, so what makes Hadrosaurus unique? Why isn't it just a Gryposaurus without a head?
Albert Prieto Marquez, a leading expert on these animals, identified specific features in a 2011 study. For instance, on the humerus, the upper arm bone, there is a ridge called the pectoral crest. This is where the chest muscles attach. In Hadrosaurus, this crest is shortened. It's slightly over 40% of the total humeral length.
That is incredibly specific.
It has to be. And the delta pectoral crest, which is part of that structure, is developed from the humeral shaft in a way that creates a broad lateral facet. Basically, the muscle attachment points are shaped differently than in its cousins. It suggests a different musculature.
And the hip. You mentioned the hip.
Then you look at the ilium, the top hip bone. There's a feature called the supraacetabular crest, which is a shelf of bone above the hip socket. In Hadrosaurus, the highest point of this crest is lower than in other species, and the crest itself is shortened from front to rear.
So to the untrained eye, it's just a bumpy bone. But to an expert, these bumps are a fingerprint.
Exactly. These minute details are the only reason we can say, this is Hadrosaurus foulkii. And not just some generic duck-billed dinosaur. They are the clues that prove it's a distinct species, which becomes incredibly important later on.
And that leads us perfectly into the drama. Because for a long time, those clues weren't considered good enough. We enter the classification crisis.
Yes, the nomen dubium era.
Nomen dubium. Sounds like a Harry Potter spell, but it's actually pretty harsh insult in the scientific world, isn't it?
It is. It is the Latin for dubious name. Essentially, it means the name is based on fossil material that is too incomplete or nondescript to be considered scientifically useful.
It's basically being erased from the books.
It's being put in a taxonomic penalty box. You can't use it for classification because you can't be sure what it is.
How did Hadrosaurus, the first mounted dinosaur, the animal that started it all, end up being dubious?
Because the type specimen, the original skeleton folk found, lacked a skull. Many 20th century paleontologists argued that you couldn't tell Hadrosaurus apart from other hadrosaurs based only on the body bones. They thought the body bones were too generic across the group.
They were saying, without a head, it's just a bag of bones. We can't prove it's its own species.
Correct. They argued it was too incomplete to compare definitively to other hadrosaurs, which were being discovered with beautiful, complete skulls out west. So for decades, the most famous dinosaur in New Jersey, the first mounted skeleton in the world, was technically considered a dubious species.
Not a ghost.
It was a ghost in the taxonomy books. A historical footnote, but not a valid scientific entity.
That's tragic. It's like saying the Model T isn't a real car because we lost the hood ornament.
It was a very strict interpretation of the rules of nomenclature. But science evolves, technology evolves, our understanding evolves. In 2011, there was that major reevaluation we touched on.
Redemption.
The 2011 study by Prieto Marquez looked at those specific characteristics we just mentioned. The robust limbs, the specific shape of the ilium and crests. Using modern comparative techniques, the researchers concluded that these traits were unique enough to distinguish it, even without a head.
So the fingerprint was finally legible.
Exactly. Hadrosaurus foulkii was reinstated as a valid taxon. It is no longer nomen dubium, it is the real deal.
But the drama didn't end there. There was a whole family tree shuffle, right? This part gets a little complex, so walk us through it slowly.
Oh, the taxonomy of duck-billed dinosaurs is a battlefield. It's constantly changing. Okay, so Hadrosaurus is the type genus for the family Hadrosauridae. That means the whole family is named after it.
Right, like how the Smith family is named after a Smith. It's the original.
Exactly. Traditionally, the family was split into two subfamilies. Hadrosaurinae, which were the ones largely without big, hollow crests on their heads, and Lambeosaurinae, the ones with the big, hollow, trombone-like crests.
Like Parasaurolophus.
The classic example. So, Hadrosaurus obviously belonged to the non-crested group Hadrosaurinae. It was their namesake.
Makes sense. It's the original Hadrosaurian.
But in 2008, studies using cladistics, which is a more rigorous, computer-based method of building family trees, showed something surprising. Hadrosaurus turned out to be more primitive than the other members of its own subfamily.
Primitive here meaning simpler or just older.
In cladistics, it means basal. It branched off earlier in the evolutionary tree. It wasn't actually a close relative of the classic hadrosaurians like Edmontosaurus or Saurolophus. It was a distant cousin that split off way back at the beginning of the lineage.
So it was the odd one out in its own club.
Precisely. This caused a nomenclature crisis. If Hadrosaurus isn't closely related to the other hadrosaurians, you can't keep calling them hadrosaurians, because in taxonomy, a group has to include its namesake. It's a fundamental rule.
So what happened? They could just ignore it.
No, they had to redefine the groups. The name Hadrosaurini was restricted to contain only Hadrosaurus, just him, sitting alone in his VIP section.
So it's a subfamily of one. Lonely.
Very lonely. And the massive group formerly known as Hadrosaurians, all those famous non-crested ducks like Edmontosaurus and Maiasaura, was renamed Saurolophini.
Wow. So because this one headless skeleton from New Jersey was so unique and primitive, it forced scientists to rename a huge chunk of the dinosaur family tree.
It highlights the fluidity of science. A single fossil, analyzed with new methods, can rewrite the textbooks. Current cladograms place Hadrosaurus right at the split, right before the family divides into the solid-crested Saurolophines and the hollow-crested Lambeosaurians. It's the grandfather at the fork in the road.
I want to pivot to something that makes this animal feel incredibly real to me. We've talked about bones and names and Latin. Let's talk about its health, specifically the 2003 study on tumors.
This is a fascinating piece of paleobiology. In 2003, Bruce Rothschild and his colleagues performed a massive screening of dinosaur vertebrae.
How massive? What kind of numbers are we talking?
They scanned over 10,000 fossils from multiple museums.
Wow. That's a huge sample size.
It is. They used CT scans and fluoroscopes, modern medical imaging, to look inside the bones without having to cut them open. And they were looking for evidence of tumors and cancer.
And what did they find in Hadrosaurus?
They found them. The study identified hemangiomas, which are benign tumors of blood vessels, desmoplastic fibroma, metastatic cancer, and osteoblastoma.
These are real, recognizable diseases. Metastatic cancer.
That's serious. That means it started somewhere else and spread to the bone.
It is. And here is the surprise. These tumors were almost exclusively found in Hadrosaurus and other hadrosaurids like Brachylophosaurus and Edmontosaurus. They were not found in other dinosaur groups included in the study, like the horned dinosaurs or the stegosaurs.
That is wild. So the duck-billed dinosaurs were uniquely susceptible to cancer.
It seems so. The statistics are overwhelming. And specifically, the tumors were only found on the caudal vertebrae, the tailbones.
Only the tail, not the legs, not the back.
Only the tail. That's the part that is so strange.
Why? Why the tail? That is the big question. Was it genetic? Was it something in their environment? Some researchers speculate about environmental factors. Maybe they were eating a specific plant that had carcinogenic properties, or maybe their tails were subject to repeated stress or trauma that made them vulnerable. We just don't know.
It's incredibly humanizing, if you can say that about a reptile. To think of these animals dealing with illness. It's not just a monster roaring. It's an animal that might have had a sore tail or a chronic painful condition.
It reminds us that they were biological organisms, subject to the same pathologies that affect life today. It bridges that 80 million year gap. You look at that bone, you see the tumor, and you think, ouch, I know what that feels like.
Speaking of environment, let's set the scene. Where was Hadrosaurus living? And I don't just mean New Jersey, because New Jersey looked very different back then.
Very, very different. We are in the Late Cretaceous, specifically the Companion stage. Radiometric dating of bivalve shells from the formation places this between roughly 83.6 and 77.9 million years ago.
So no T-Rex yet.
Not yet. T-Rex is a bit later, at the very end of the Cretaceous in the Maastrichtian. Hadrosaurus is living in what is now the Woodbury Formation and possibly the Tar Heel Coachman formations further south.
But the fossil was found in marine sediment. You mentioned earlier that marl is basically ancient seafloor. Was Hadrosaurus swimming? Was it an aquatic dinosaur? That was an old theory for a while, wasn't it?
It was, based partly on their broad, duck-like snouts and flattened tails. But no, Hadrosaurus was a land animal. It lived in coastal forests and floodplains. The fact that it was found in marine sediment is a classic case of what taphonomists call bloat and float.
Oh, lovely image. Explain that for us.
It's exactly what it sounds like. The animal likely died near a river or on a coast. The carcass began to decompose. As bacteria in the gut break down the soft tissue, they produce gases. The body bloats up like a balloon.
And it becomes a balloon.
A 3-ton balloon. It gets picked up by the river current, washed out to sea, and it floats. It can float for days or weeks. Eventually, the gases escape, or the body is torn apart by scavengers, and it sinks to the bottom of the ocean.
And that explains why we have the bones we have, the disarticulation.
Exactly. As the body decayed and fell apart, some pieces dropped off earlier. Maybe the head fell off first as it's attached by a relatively thin neck, or was scavenged by a shark. The rest of the torso sank later. That explains why we have this specific mix of limbs and vertebrae, but no skull.
So it was buried.
It was buried in the silty mud of the seafloor, which became the marl that Hopkins was digging up 80 million years later.
It's amazing to think that a creature that walked through forests ended up buried with seashells.
It gives us a snapshot of the geography. The east coast of North America was very different then. Higher sea levels, different coastlines. It was a lush, subtropical environment, not unlike the Gulf Coast today.
Let's jump forward to the present day. Hadrosaurus has had a bit of a renaissance in pop culture, at least in his home state.
It has. In 1991, Hadrosaurus foulkii was designated the official state dinosaur of New Jersey.
And this wasn't just politicians deciding to be cool. This is a grassroots movement.
A grassroots movement of children. It was initiated by a teacher named Joyce Berry and her fourth grade classes at Strawbridge Elementary School. From 1988 to 1991, these kids lobbied, wrote letters to their legislators, and pushed for the designation.
I love that. Fourth graders changing state law to honor a dinosaur. It shows that you don't have to be a PhD to care about this stuff or to make a difference.
It demonstrates the power of civic engagement and the universal appeal of dinosaurs. And now, there is a statue sculpted by John Giannotti standing right in downtown Haddonfield near the Discovery site.
A tribute to their local monster.
It is. It's a great statue. It's about 8 feet tall, not quite full size, but it captures the spirit. It's a real point of pride for the town.
And what about the bones themselves? The real deal. Do we see them?
Usually the original holotite skeleton is kept in the collections at the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, mostly out of sight to protect it. It's very fragile. Bones from these marl pits can suffer from pyrite disease, what they call fossil rot, where minerals in the bone react with humidity and cause it to crumble.
So they have to keep it in a controlled environment.
Exactly. But they have let it out occasionally. There was a major exhibit from 2008 to 2009 called Hadrosaurus, the dinosaur that changed the world, where a fully assembled cast and an exhibit on the history were open to the public. It was a huge hit.
So even if you can't see the original bones, the legacy is everywhere.
Every time you see a mounted dinosaur in a museum anywhere in the world, you are looking at the legacy of Hadrosaurus. It's the one that started it all.
So let's wrap this up. We've gone from a marl pit in 1838 to a state symbol in 1991. We've talked about anatomy, cancer, and taxonomy wars. What does this all mean?
Hadrosaurus is the ultimate example of how science works. It's not a straight line. It starts with curiosity Hopkins and folk. It moves to hypothesis Leidy, saying it stands like a kangaroo. It goes through skepticism and revision, the nomen dubium era where everyone doubted it.
And it arrives at refinement.
Exactly. Modern technology revealing cancer and cladistics revealing its true place in the family tree. It's a process of constant questioning.
It's a survivor. It survived the Cretaceous, it survived the marl pit, it survived the Civil War delays, and it survived the taxonomy wars.
And it taught us that dinosaurs were not just lizards, they were something else. Something grander, more dynamic, and ultimately more interesting.
Here's a final thought for you to chew on, listeners. Hadrosaurus is one of the most famous dinosaurs in history, yet we still don't have its skull. We have a statue in Haddonfield, we have mounts in museums, and they all have heads. But those heads are educated guesses based on other animals.
It raises a provocative question, doesn't it?
Exactly. When you walk through a museum and look at those towering skeletons, how much of what you are seeing is hard fossil evidence, and how much is plaster, sculpture, and imagination filling in the blanks?
How much is science and how much is art?
How many other facts about the prehistoric world are actually just composites waiting for a 2011-style study to overturn them? It encourages us to keep asking questions.
To never assume we know the whole story.
Next time you look at a dinosaur statue, look a little closer. Ask yourself, is that real or is that the artist talking? Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Keep digging.
See you next time.